What's up, everybody? This is Teague with Battle City Games, back with another post-Alliance Insight deck profile. Today we're going to be taking a look at a brand new archetype out of the set, and that's going to be Regenesis. This is a very cool archetype in my opinion. It's very cool thematically with the artwork, but also in the way that it looks to play. It's not a combo-heavy deck where you're going to be taking 10 or 15-minute turns to set up a very complex board. It focuses on inherently powerful monsters, but each have individual effects, and focus on grinding your opponent down in the resource game, getting the game to turn 3, 4, 5, and just wearing your opponent out, where all of your cards are consistently recurring themselves back, and just making efficient one-for-one trades. This may not be as high-profile a deck as something like Malice or Mitsurugi, but I think it's a deck that really rewards understanding your own cards as well as your opponents and making the best possible trades in order to wear their resources down. So there's a couple of different ways to play this deck. Today we're taking a look at Regenesis Kashtira, which I think is really interesting because in the OCG, this deck never got the chance to play with Kashtira engine because it's so limited over there, but because we have those cards at full power over here, you do get to see what they can really do together. There are some other ways to play the deck. You can play Regenesis Voiceless Voice, Regenesis Vanquished Soul, or you can play the deck with a Dogmatica engine. So if y'all would like to see one of those other variants, let me know down in the comments below. But with that, we're going to go ahead and get into Regenesis Kashtira. And we are starting off with the monsters as always. So Regenesis Archfiend is the main searcher of the deck. He can summon himself by revealing any monster in your hand with 2500 attack or defense. And then on summon, he adds a Regenesis card from your deck or banishment to your hand. The banishment part is key there because when you do get into those grind games, if you're going to get something like Malice, or you may be using White Binder to banish cards out of your graveyard, still being able to grab them back with Archfiends is very important. And he can get any card, so he does get you access to your spells and traps as well. And then he does have the effect, all the Regenesis monsters except for one share this effect. If he's in your graveyard during your opponent's end phase, because he was sent there on that turn, he adds himself back. So that's where that grind game I mentioned in the introduction comes from, just that ability to keep getting your Regenesis cards back to hand after you've used their abilities, after your opponent's cleared your board, just consistently gives you those resources to punch back at your opponent. So 3 Archfiend, very important to the deck. You should always be using him at 3 in basically any variant you're going to play. From there, we have 1 Regenesis Sage. This is the Omni-Negate of the archetype. So it summons itself if you have a monster with 2500 attack or defense already on board. And then it's an Omni-Negate. So if your opponent activates a spell card, trap card, or monster effect, you contribute or send any other Regenesis card from your field or hand to the graveyard to negate that effect. So it doesn't send itself, it sends any other card, and it can also, again, send your spells and traps. And it's great if you can send a monster, because, again, that's going to trigger their effects in your opponent's end phase to just add themselves back. And then it does have that same effect as well. If it's in the graveyard during your opponent's end phase, it'll come back. So very powerful, Omni-Negate. We're only playing one of several of these Regenesis names, though, because they're not starters. We don't get you into any of your other engine. They're more so your inboard pieces, and again, there's so many ways to get to them and get them back that we only need 1 copy. From there, we are also on 1 copy of Regenesis Warrior. This is a bounce, so it has the exact same summon condition as Sage. It just has a quick effect, tribute itself, and then target a monster your opponent controls and return it to the hand or extra deck, wherever it came from. So another powerful form of disruption, and then also going to bring itself back to your hand during your opponent's end phase if it went to the graveyard that turn. And then 1 Regenesis Dragon. This is probably technically the weakest, but it is a tribute itself to banish an opponent's spell or trap card. So it's great against cards like Malice and Underground, Sinful Spoils of Deception, any sort of continuous or field spell. True Light, for example, this is very powerful against. So it is still a powerful interaction, especially when you're pairing it alongside an Omni Negate, alongside a Bounce. And again, the more you get into that grind game and you're able to establish multiple Regenesis monsters, you're going to put yourself in a situation where it becomes very hard for your opponent to play through each of those individually powerful effects. And then for the last Regenesis monster, we are on one Regenesis Lord. So this is the only one with the very unique summoning condition. It must be special summoned by banishing a Regenesis monster you control. So it doesn't have the ability to just come out on board if you control something with 2500 attack or defense. It doesn't reveal anything. You have to banish a Regenesis monster. And then on summon, it lets you set any Regenesis spell or trap from your deck directly to your field. So that's a powerful way to get some of your Regenesis cards onto board, and we'll see what those are here in a little bit. And then it does also have an effect that during the battle phase, it doubles its attack, so it goes from 2,500 to 5,000, and also inflicts piercing damage. The stat line in this deck is generally 2,500, so having a monster that can get up to 5,000 to push for lethal, as well as get over your opponent's larger monsters, is very important, which is why I chose to include this card in the deck. It is a little bit more of a brick, technically speaking, but I feel it's necessary, again, to get you to a higher damage threshold and to get over anything that's bigger than 2,500. And that's it for Regenesis cards. Moving into the Kashtira engine, we are on triple Unicorn. So again, just that 2,500 stat line for the attack on Unicorn makes it very important because you can reveal it for Archfiend. If it's on your board, it's going to let you summon out all your other Regenesis monsters. And Unicorn is just a inherently powerful card in this format as well. Most extra decks don't have the space to be playing multiple copies of their key cards, so using a Unicorn to banish something like a White Binder is going to really inhibit your opponent's grind game. Against Raziel, banish their Detonator. Great, now they have to play the entire game without a Detonator, so it really leans into that, alright, I'm going to try to wear you down by taking out some of your key resources and limiting your ability to combo off and kill me. And then the ability to grab a Kashtira spell or trap, or spell, excuse me, is also great because we do play a couple of those. For the other Kashtira monster, we are on double Fenrir. Fenrir unfortunately does not have the stat line we need in this deck, but he gets you to Unicorn, which does have the stat line. So even if you don't open with a 2,500 monster in hand to reveal, say for Archfiend, you can summon Fenrir, Fenrir search Unicorn. Now you have a stat line that you need. And his banish effect is still a very powerful form of disruption. Putting the card face down banish means most decks aren't going to have access to get to it. And he can also serve as a board breaker, so when you do find yourself going second, Fenrir, starting off with a Fenrir puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. Didn't go with the full 3 copies because, again, he doesn't have the stat line we need, but he can get us there, and he is good in wearing your opponent down as well, so we're on 2 copies. And that wraps it up for all of the non-hand trap monsters. We're going to go ahead and get into Regenesis spells right now. So we are on triple copies of Regenesis Code. This is kind of like an emergency teleport for the deck. It's a quick play spell that lets you special summon a Regenesis monster from deck. It does lock you out of the extra deck until the end of the following turn where you do that, but the build we're on is not focused on the extra deck at all, so that's a sacrifice we're willing to make. But just having another way to get to your Regenesis Archfiend, which will then trigger and get you another Regenesis card, really helps the deck get going. And again, being a quick play means that we can also set it and use it on our opponent's turn, and it does help us play around Joel a little bit as well. Being able to use this in the draw phase, summon Archfiend, search a card, and now we've played around Joel a bit. It does also have a second effect. Can't be used the turn it was sent to the graveyard, but it banishes itself from the graveyard and then targets one of your banished Regenesis monsters and adds it to hand. So again, a little bit of that grind game that we were talking about, and especially with Regenesis Lord banishing something to summon itself, you can then recur that back with your Regenesis Code, or again, if you're against something like Malice, you can recur back those resources. Makes it a lot harder for your opponent to wear you down. Moving on to the other Regenesis spell, this is simply 3 copies of Regenesis. This is the search spell for the deck. It adds any Regenesis monster from your deck to your hand, or sends it to the graveyard 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be looking to send anything directly to the graveyard, but you could if you needed to. But it's just going to search in your Regenesis monster, so searching your Archfiend to get started, searching your Sage, your Warrior, whatever you need. One thing that I do like to do, if I do start with Archfiend, I like to actually go Archfiend, search Regenesis, and then use Regenesis to search the monster that I needed, if I'm not concerned about Droll. And the reason that I like to go through the spell card to get to the monster is because of its second effect on this card, which lets you banish it from your graveyard, except for the turn it was sent there, banish from your graveyard, and then special summon a Regenesis monster from your graveyard. So sometimes your Regenesis monsters may get stranded in your graveyard. Maybe your opponent negates their effect to add back. Maybe you sent them on your turn instead of your opponent's. So this is just another effect that gives you that grind game. Even if your opponent whittles down your hand and maybe you don't have Regenesis monsters in hand, you can literally go Regenesis, banish itself, summon back Archfiend, Archfiend search. Now you're off to the races again. So very powerful card. You do just want to be careful doing your best to play around Droll, whether you're just when you're deciding whether to search this card or search a Regenesis monster directly. Moving into the Kashtira related spells, we are on Triple Pressure Planet. This just gets us to Unicorn or Fenrir, whichever we need. Typically it's going to be Unicorn, but this gets us to Unicorn, which then gives us the stat line we need for Archfiend. And the Kashtira cards are so powerful in themselves. If your opponent does have interaction, in a lot of cases, they're going to use that on the Kashtira cards. They're going to use that on Pressure Planet to keep you from getting to Unicorn or Fenrir. Especially if you're going first, once you set up a Unicorn, it puts a lot of pressure on your opponent to maybe not activate monster hand traps after that point. So that's why your opponent will sometimes just be like, all right, I need to ash this pressure planet in order to stop it from going off. And then that frees up your Regenesis cards to resolve. So triple pressure planet. And then we are on 1 Birth and 1 Kashtira Theosis. Birth is typically what we're going to grab with Unicorn. It lets us normal summon to level 7 without tribute, which some of our Regenesis monsters are. And then also that ability to, again, help us with the grind game by summoning back our Kashtira monsters. And then the disruption effect to banish from your opponent's graveyard when they activate a spell card or effect just fits very well with the theme of the deck. And then Kashtira Theosis is kind of the other card we can get. So in some combos, maybe we have everything we need. So we're going to Unicorn, get Theosis on the Unicorn to also set up that Fenrir as a disruption as well. Just gives us options, especially like you don't want to hard draw Birth and then not have a search target for Unicorn. But I think one of each is a perfect amount for this deck. And then for the last spell card, 1 Prosperity. The Regenesis engine itself is kind of small, especially when it comes to starters. You've got 3 Archfiend, 3 Regenesis, 3 Regenesis Code. So we want to increase our odds of being able to see one of those Regenesis starters. Prosperity can do that. And again, we don't particularly care about most cards in our extra deck, so we don't care that we're banishing 6. So 1 Prosperity. I did choose to go with Prosperity over Extravagance because I want to see very specific cards. I want to see a Regenesis starter if I need it. I want to see a Kashtira card if maybe I open Regenesis but no Kashtira. Digging 6 cards into your deck, it's extremely likely you're going to see a piece of your engine to get you going. And then for the 1 trap in the deck, 1 copy of Regenesis Birth. This is a very powerful card for the archetype. It's a continuous trap, has 2 effects on it. 1, you can send a Regenesis monster from your deck to the graveyard, and then target a monster your opponent controls, and flip it face down. So it has a Book of Moon effect, and then, of course, using it on your opponent's turn will allow you to add that Regenesis monster back to your hand during your opponent's end phase. So not only is it disrupting your opponent, but it's also providing you with resources going into your next turn. And you can use it on your own turn as well, of course. You just won't get to add the monster back, but still a very powerful disruption effect. And then it has a second effect, can send itself from the face-up spell and trap zone to the graveyard to summon back as many Regenesis monsters as possible from your graveyard or banishment. So once you get into that later game, you can use this to literally just bring back 3-4 guys back to your board, and make it, one, maybe harder for your opponent to play through your board, or two, just give you your resources back and threaten your opponent in that way. That second effect can only be used on your opponent's turn, and it is a hard one effect or the other. You can't use both in the same turn. But overall, a very powerful card. One you do want to get access to, which again, you can hard search it with Regenesis Archfiend, or you can set it with Regenesis Lord. And then moving into the hand traps for the deck, we are on triple Molcharmi Fulos. Molcharmis are very important in this format because of the power level of decks. One-on-one interactions like Valor and Imperm aren't always enough. You want powerful cards like the Molcharmis, where your opponent's really going to have to alter the way that they're going about their turn, or risk giving you 6 or 7 cards. And again, because of the nature of Regenesis being that grindy deck, if we can have our opponent end on a half board, and then we can play all of our Kashtira and our Regenesis cards into that half board, puts us exactly where we want to be. We are not stopping with just Fuelos. We are also on triple Perulia. If you wanted this to be Meows, depending on your locals, or maybe you want to side Meows, you could do that as well. But again, we just really want to maximize our odds of opening with at least one Molcharmi when we're going second, without playing a full 9 copies. That can be a little bit bricky, but 6 to 7 Molcharmis is going to be your sweet spot. So we're on 6 in this deck. If you don't have access to the Molcharmis, I would recommend just swapping these for another power hand trap like Nibiru that can conflict with your Kashtira cards a little bit, but again, you want those high impact hand traps as much as possible. Speaking of high impact, we are on triple copies of Droll and Lockbird. It's a little bit weaker into Malice, but they do more searching now than they used to. And again, against pretty much any other deck in the format, like Mitsurugi or Ryzeal, Droll can just be a turn ender by itself. And again, we want those power cards. It will be on you if you open Droll and a Molcharmi to decide where you want to use for Droll and Lockbird. But I do think, again, that power interaction, it's worth the slot in the deck. Then we are also on triple Ash Blossom. Still just a very powerful hand trap. You do want to make sure you know where to use it against a deck like Malice or Mitsurugi, but it does have powerful interactions. Also, if your opponent does hit you with a Perulia when you're going first, that's pretty much the only Molcharmi this deck is weak to is Perulia, so having the Ash Blossom to stop that can be nice as well. From there, our last couple of hand traps, we are on double copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Again, I didn't want to go with Nibiru in this deck if I didn't have to, because we don't want to end up with a monster on our board cutting us off from our Kashtira lines. And Ghost Ogre can actually be a pretty powerful interaction in this format. A lot of Malice decks are going through cards like Wicked or Splash Mage in order to get through their combo. And if you hit them with a Ghost Ogre that they weren't prepared for, you can just completely disrupt their combo and force them to end on a very weaker board than they otherwise might have. And then for the last 2 cards in the deck, we are on double Infinite Impermanence. So this is, again, not quite as powerful as it was in previous formats, which is why we're only playing 2 copies, but it does act decently as a board breaker and can still have solid interactions into some decks in the format, like White Forest, normal summoning a Sylvie to try to start for combos, for example. So 2 copies of Imperm. This is a 41 card deck. Tough to find space to cut anything, so we don't want to go too low on our hand trap counts. I think 41 is okay. If you did want to go down to 40, you could either look at reducing a hand trap by 1, potentially reducing the prosperity, or reducing like Fenrir down to 1. Wouldn't be the end of the world either. Moving into the extra deck, this is going to be fairly quick because, again, it's mostly utility we have in here. There's nothing integral to our combo. Typically, we're not even ending our first turn with an extra deck monster on board. But we have 1 Salamangreat Almirage. This is just something you can turn a hand trap into this. And then if you have like a Kashtira monster, you can link the 2 off for an SP Little Knight to get SPs on summon effect. That's really the only thing you're using this for. But again, utility. We are on 2 copies of SP Little Knight. Again, we have space in the extra deck. Why not play a second SP? That way, if we go through one early, we have another one for that grind game. Also makes it harder for our opponent, if maybe they're playing cashier cards, to take out, a one-of power card like SP Little Knight. So 2 copies there. 1 copy of IP Masquerena. There are some combos, depending on what you open, where you can end, for example, on an IP Masquerena plus a Cashier, Fenrir, or Unicorn, and then let your Cashier card resolve on your opponent's turn, then use Masquerena to make an SP on your opponent's turn. Again, it doesn't come up terribly often, but there have been enough games where I've had it come up that she deserves a spot in the extra deck. 1 copy of Celine, the Master Magician. Sage is a spellcaster, so we can get into Celine with Sage, and then immediately use Celine to revive back Sage, which gives us the fodder we need for a Link 4 in access code. Just a way to clear boards, get big damage on the board, whatever we need to. And again, because of Sage being a spellcaster, it's not too hard for us to get there. It is extremely easy with this deck to put 3 or 4 bodies on board in one turn. So getting those into an access code can be nice. And then for the last Link monster, 1 Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. Again, utility, but again, because it's so easy for us to get bodies on board, it's not unreasonable to be able to go into her if there's a problem card we just can't otherwise out. Then moving on to the Exceeds. So because we're on Cashier, we are on 1 Shingra Era. There's hands where it will be best to get to this, especially if you have a Pressure Planet set up and maybe no access to your Regenesis cards. Being able to end on like a Shingra Era, Pressure Planet, and a Fenrir, and then in the standby phase you bring out a Unicorn. Sometimes that can be enough to stop your opponent from playing the game, especially if you pair it with a hand trap or 2. 1 copies of Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon. This deck does hit for pretty decent stat lines, so you can do something like maybe you have 3 Regenesis monsters, you punch your opponent for 7,500, overlay into Flare Metal. Now they can't play the game unless their first card is an infinite impermanence on Flare Metal. 1 copy of number 11 Big Eye. Again, we have a decent amount of level 7s. Sometimes Big Eye can come up to steal a power card, especially from Mitsurugi. Stealing like a Murakumo and then using it to tax your opponent can be powerful, so worth a slot. 1 Dark Arm, the Dragon of Annihilation. Again, just flex. We do have issues with those bigger stat lines, so being either able to overlay into Dark Arm and then just detach to destroy a card can definitely come up in some situations. For rank 8, we're playing 1 copy of number 90, Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord. This could be any other rank 8, Hope Harbinger, or Dingirsu. I like Photon Lord because it does detach for its effect to negate. So if you're detaching a Regenesis card during your opponent's turn, that'll come back during the end phase and give you that resource. Versus Hope Harbinger doesn't detach to negate the spell, so you're not getting immediate access to that resource again. Then we are on 1 Zeus. I have yet to have this come up, but theoretically it could, which is why it's there. 1 copy of Typhon. Again, we're a grindy deck, so we definitely want to include Typhon. If there's something else in the extra deck you don't like, I could even see potentially bumping Typhon up to 2, so that in those longer games we do have the ability to go through multiple Typhons if necessary. And then for the last card in the extra deck, we are on the brand new Jiraishin, the Cursed Thunder God. This is a level 11 Synchro, so we can make it with one of our level 8 Regenesis monsters, plus one of our level 3 Ghost Girls like Ash Blossom or Ghost Ogre. And then it has a couple of effects. So every time your opponent resolves a card effect, you gain 300 life points. So it's very good for getting yourself some additional life points. And then it has a quick effect on your opponent's turn. It tributes itself, pays 1,500 life points, and you choose either destroy all face-up monsters your opponent controls, or destroy all face-up spell and traps they control. Again, doesn't come up too often, but it is utility. And that does it for the deck profile, everybody. Like I said, I think this is a really cool deck, and the more I've practiced with it and gotten reps under my belt with it, it really does reward high quality play on your part to grind out that game and get yourself in a situation to win with your resources. I really love how it plays. I really suggest checking it out. And like I said, if there's another variant that you want to see, just let me know down in the comments, and I'm more than happy to develop a profile with that variant as well. Thanks for watching. Keep an eye out for more deck profiles coming soon. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.